Berkshire News and Politics, bringing you the news and key issues affecting your area and your community, whether you live in Reading, Bracknell Forest, Wokingham, Slough or the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. Today we have a local plan special. Following a tempestuous and rowdy council meeting which saw incensed residents facing off against councillors, police and security, we talked to some of the residents involved about what happened, why and what next. Listen out for more incendiary revelations and great insights for your area if you are going through the local plan process as activists, professionals and professors reveal their how-to. Berkshire News and Politics, keeping you informed and empowered. So we're talking now to Tina Quadrino, one of the founding members of the Maidenhead Great Park campaign. Tina, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Wisdom.
Right. So, Tina, you made an impassioned plea to councillors at the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead during their council meeting when they went to vote or sought to vote on approving or not approving the borough local plan, which of course is the plan which sets out where and how and when developments will happen across any particular local authority area, and whether they're going to focus on brownfield, greenfield, how will the place look in the future? Tina, what were your thoughts about that meeting?
There are two things that struck me about the meeting, really. The first thing really is the passion and the commitment from the people of this borough that this plan is not right for them. That was the first thing that really struck me. There were a lot of very impassioned people who were really upset with the way the whole meeting went. The second thing that really struck me is that unfortunately, our council is really making these decisions along party lines, and I just don't feel that that's the right thing to do for our council, for our borough, sorry, because some of these councillors were actually voting for this borough local plan that is going to be hugely damaging for their own residents, for their own area. Two areas, for example, St Mary's and Cox Green, are going to be massively impacted by just the golf course development. And then obviously you've got Cookham and you've got all the surrounding villages that are going to be really negatively impacted by this borough local plan. So those were the main things that really struck me about the meeting, is that the plan really, the vote really was not for the residents, in my opinion.
Okay, and were you happy with the comments that were made on the day?
No, not really. I mean, I think the opposition councillors, unfortunately, we have to call them that at the moment because that's kind of the way it really is panning out. So the opposition councillors really fought very hard to explain their reasoning and their rationale for why this plan really isn't good for the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. But all of the, unfortunately, Conservative councillors, all of their comments were really, I did feel that they were misleading, really, and certainly in relation to our environment and climate emergency and the strategy that sort of encompasses that. I felt that the councillor in charge of those areas really was not championing the real action that needs to happen in this borough in order to meet the targets of that strategy. And I felt very, very disappointed by that.
How would you answer the point that perhaps Conservative councillors would make, which is that, well, do you know what? Everybody had a chance to have their say on the borough local plan.
Well, I don't think they did. I mean, certainly I've been involved in this campaign for the last 2 years, and it wasn't, I didn't really know anything about the borough local plan prior to this. And, you know, we as residents are all very busy earning a living, looking after our families, trying to do the best that we can in our lives. And actually, I think the borough local plan does impact all of us. And I think not enough was done before in order to engage people. But I have to say, from my understanding of what has gone before, a lot of people that were aware of it really did get involved and tried really hard to steer the borough local plan in a direction that was much more satisfactory for the people of this borough. But it did feel as though their comments, their views were all 100% ignored. And that's really very sad. And I did hear today that actually after one element of the consultation and changes to the plan, another consultation was supposed to take place, and I believe it didn't. So I don't feel that this council really wanted the engagement of the people of this borough. They really did just want to push this borough local plan through.
Well, I hope you're listening, councillors. This is an important point, and Tina's not the first person to make it. Tina, let's move on to the actual borough local plan. What are the problems with the borough local plan?
The figures. There are no supplementary documents where there should be. The detail is not there. There is no protection for the environment. We've moved on a lot since 2016 when it was first sort of drafted, and it's really not good enough to just say we are going to create supplementary documents to address this, this and this. I want to know how you are going to address that now. I want to know now. We're in an emergency now, and those documents are just not there. And the housing numbers, as myself and my colleagues who are fighting to save Maidenhead Golf Course from development in order to hopefully create Maidenhead Great Park in the future, we've been saying all along that the figures, the housing numbers, are just not right. They have changed in the interim period, and as has the world, as has the climate emergency, and this borough local plan has not changed with it.
But what would you like to see happen next in an ideal world?
Well, in an ideal world, the residents of this borough would not have to try and find £10,000–12,000 in order to challenge this borough local plan. In an ideal world, we'd have a borough that could actually listen to us, so we didn't have to do that. But and in an ideal world, this plan would be scrapped as it currently is and start again. It doesn't have to start again completely from scratch. There are probably a few bits of that borough local plan that are actually quite good, but it definitely needs to be changed, and it cannot go forward as it is.
Okay, so how would you respond to some of the councillors who might say that if we didn't put it in place, that we would have a developers free-for-all? The
problem with that statement is that Greenbelt is Greenbelt, and you don't have speculative development on Greenbelt. It has to go through the proper processes. It has to have a very good reason for being developed if it isn't part of a borough local plan. And the problem is that this borough local plan takes a lot of our Greenbelt out of Greenbelt. And it's all very well for councillors to say that we've got 82% of our borough is Greenbelt. 82% of Maidenhead is not Greenbelt. And that's the key. We are getting all of the houses for the whole, well, not all of them, but a large majority of them for the whole borough. And actually, we don't have that much Greenbelt in Maidenhead. And the vast majority of the Greenbelt land that we have in this borough is Crown land. We can't touch that. That's not ever going to be available for development. So we have to always suffer, and it's going to impact our health, our well-being, and more importantly, it's going to really limit the choices, the opportunities for health and well-being for our children and our grandchildren. And that really upsets me.
Okay, those are some fairly serious points. So what next for the Maidenhead Golf Course and the Maidenhead Great Park group?
Well, Maidenhead Great Park campaign group, we have obviously organised ourselves over the last 2 years, and we're in a very strong position to challenge the borough local plan. We are fundraising at the moment in order to take the next step, which is a barrister's opinion. We are challenging the whole borough local plan, not just the bit that contains Maidenhead Great Park. So my main message really to anybody that is watching this podcast who lives in the borough is please support us financially, because it costs an awful lot of money to do this. We are fighting the whole plan. We are also fighting the bits that you don't like. So please help us to help you. It really doesn't make any sense for all of us to fight this plan. It's just so expensive. So help us to help you. We'll all fight this plan together, and then we can move forwards once we have hopefully got to a point where this borough local plan needs to be revisited.
So if people wanted to help you, they wanted to find out more, if they want to donate some money, where would they go?
So the first thing to do is to look at our website, which is maidenheadgreatpark.co.uk. In there, you will have links to our GoFundMe page. You will have links to how to contact me and my colleagues. The other thing, we've got social media presence as well. So we are on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're also on Nextdoor. So there's lots of information and lots of links to the GoFundMe page there. Those are the main ways really that you can get hold of us and help to support this campaign. But equally, the other way you can help us is to tell people in your local area what we're trying to do for everybody in the local borough, because it does often, we're calling it Maidenhead Great Park, and we're championing the golf course, but we are fighting the whole plan. So, you know, if you are in Cookham, if you are in Bray, if you are in all of the other outlying villages, we're trying to help you too. So please help us to help you.
Thank you. Now, Tina, there are a number of other local authorities in the area. There's Wokingham, there's Bracknell, for example, who at various stages in the creation of their own local plan. What advice would you give residents in helping them to shape their local area?
Get involved. Definitely get involved. Make your voices heard as early as possible. I think one of the reasons, and not everybody's circumstance is going to be the same, but one of the reasons I think that our campaign has hopefully been as successful as it has is because we created a positive vision for the future with regards to calling it Maidenhead Great Park. We are also very lucky in that we've got Windsor Great Park, so it is quite a nice sort of synergy there. But I think creating a positive vision is something that's really important, because there is so much negativity around in the world, and especially in politics, national and local, some of it is really not very pleasant. So I think having that positive message of what could be, if we all get behind it, is really important.
Tina Quadrino, one of the co-founders of the Maidenhead Great Park Group, wish you well with your campaign. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Wisdom.
Here with Paul Strzelecki. Paul, tell me about your professorship. What are you a professor of?
Oh, science and engineering.
Okay.
Yes.
And obviously you're RBWM resident, so you've taken a great interest in the local plan. Why is that?
I took an interest simply because I wanted to involve myself in the community a lot more. So I went to the library and read the plan in 2017, and led to all sorts of actions as a consequence.
Okay, so tell us about the plan.
Well, we call it a plan. It's not a plan. It's a description of how to build some houses. Actually, the wrong number of houses. One of my first observations was no vision. It might surprise people to know that 99% of the residents can't reach A&E within 30 minutes. I expected to see provision for a hospital, for example, rather than taking one out of commission. The plan is 10 years old. It's 4 years since it was submitted. It takes no account of COVID. It takes no account of the climate emergency that we declared during this process. So it doesn't take account of even the fact that we need half as many homes as the plan originally set out to achieve. So it's not a current and relevant plan. One of the things you do notice is that you have to become a lawyer to understand these plans. It's 800 pages long. But there is some rules, and one of the rules is that you have to cooperate with boroughs that are adjacent to your own. And I questioned the fact that RBWM actually had not cooperated with Wickham, now Bucks Council, on issues to do with traffic over the most critical bridge in the village, in the borough, arguably, which is Cookham, which has two of the major strategic routes, actually two of the three northerly routes, intersect at the bridge and causes gridlock as it is today. let alone when an increase in delay times of over 500% happen as a consequence of the plan. And those issues, that issue should have been discussed, legally should have been discussed, and wasn't. Cookham Bridge joins Berkshire with Buckinghamshire,
Right.
Cookham to Bourne End. And it's a one-way bridge. About 20 years ago, it was made one way because of
It's very
structural
narrow.
issues.
Yeah.
So it is one way with traffic lights. So you're going to use it half the time, as it were, whichever direction you're in. And it is literally the point where two of the strategic highways, including the one which has the most delays in the entire borough, which starts its journey going past the Maidenhead golf course.
Okay.
So it's a critical thoroughfare.
All right.
That's why it should have been discussed. Actually, the Duty to Cooperate Act is 2011, so it's been in place all the way through the plan-making process. So all the way from 2012, which is stated when the plan activity started, to 2018 when it was submitted, should have had meetings. In fact, the only items that refer to it are two meetings where they decided to have cooperation and not actually do any cooperation.
All right. So Wycombe have been a bit more forthcoming, I understand, with responding to your questions, but RBWM haven't. What responses have you had from each of those councils?
Well, RBWM stated in 2019 there were no minutes of any meetings to do with cooperation, and as recently as November of 21, Bucks Council confirmed that there were no such meetings on the subject either. In other words, there is no evidence and there were no meetings.
There were no meetings, and yet RBWM is refusing to acknowledge that even as late as this morning.
Well, that's true. In the adoption meeting, I made a claim which, in fairness, the CEO of RBWM asked the councillors to take note of a potential legal issue. That wasn't taken on board. They adopted the plan. But this position has been maintained throughout this period and never been satisfactorily addressed.
And what's the consequence of there having been no meetings, and so no cooperation and consultation has really taken place with fellow councils?
Oh, it's simple. The inspector has no discretion. It's called being legally non-compliant, which means that she has no option but to recommend the plan is not adopted. In other words, it would have been thrown out at the start of the process.
So why has the inspector permitted it?
It's a question I've asked the inspector and challenged regularly as recently as December of last year. I have no answer to that.
Okay, so it could be that this plan is illegal.
Well, yes, indeed. It's been adopted. There's some technical things about what happens next and Secretary of State and High Courts, but I maintain that that cooperation didn't take place, therefore it's illegal.
What does your analysis of the facts tell you about the traffic flow through Cookham Bridge, and where did you get that data from?
Well, there's several answers to that. First of all, even though the plan is 800 pages and thousands of pages of backup material, you could not do an analysis of the traffic flow. So I requested from the borough and onward to the consultants who did the work for data sets to show me how I could analyse the delays through the Cookham village. I received that information, and from that I determined that at the bridge, for example, there would be increased delays of 540%, which technically means it goes down from a specified 17 miles an hour to 2 miles an hour. In other words, less than walking pace. Okay. And actually with other events that have taken place since, such as the Odney Club being allowed to use their facility as a conference centre for everybody, it would tend to mean it will be gridlocked.
Right.
So this is where that data came from, the analysis, but also on the other side of the bridge, there are 600 homes. In Cookham and near to, we're going to have 600 homes.
New homes.
New homes in the plan. That means you effectively, if you can envisage it, you've got a one-way bridge with 600 homes facing 600 homes, like a battle. And that's not even accounting for all the other developments that sit behind it.
So people of Bourne End, the people of Cookham love you, and people of Cookham, people of Bourne End love you too. So it's not quite a battle in that sense. No, indeed. I said it jokingly because actually the Keep Bourne End Green Group have been very supportive, and in arguing. Incidentally, their plan was passed
immediately the application for the first 400 homes went in, and most interestingly, their highways department refused to support that plan because of traffic on the roads.
Yet our planning team have said no problem.
Well, more than that, you would think that as they use national traffic models, you would think as they use universal models, that the models would sort of merge as they come to the bridge. Well, not so. Wickham's plan, Buckinghamshire's plan, says that there'll be 130 new cars hitting the bridge as a consequence of their developments.
Per day or per hour? Or
at the peak time, 8 till 9 o'clock in the morning, as a reference point. Our model, which also looks at the traffic hitting the bridge from Bourne End side, so the two things should match, is actually 400, the difference is 400%. They say it's 400% less. So there's no commonality, even if either of those numbers are incorrect.
And this perhaps evidences your point that this is a plan for development rather than a plan looking to consider the interests of all residents.
Exactly that. I mean, how many houses you build is incidental from. The other aspect of a plan is that it has to be legal, but it also has to be sound. That's a technical term. And one of the things about soundness is unsustainability, which means we won't do anything that's going to affect our future generations. My argument is this affects this generation as much as future, where we're going to be gridlocked. Everybody knows we've got a narrow pound in the village, we've got the bridge and the high street, and it's on the major route through the borough. So one would expect the analysis to be rigorous, and it has not been, and it tells us a very bad story.
So why did the inspector allow the plan to get through on that concept of being sound?
Well, you would have to ask the inspector this question. She did query some of the evidence, but finally, she never said my evidence was wrong. She found that RBWM's evidence was the one to use. Okay. And so I'm as lost as anybody as to know why you wouldn't accept quality analysis.
Even within that, there was a game that was being played with RBWM submitting evidence very late, out of time, and sometimes even after the inspector, I understand, has made her deliberations.
Oh, indeed. In fact, during the hearings, the second hearings in November 2020, when I argued strongly for evidence of the cooperation, which then leads to this whole issue on traffic, first of all, she asked for it at the lunch break, then the next day, then said at the end of hearings. Finally, an answer was given 9 months later, after all hearings had finished and any form of communication, and it didn't include any reference to this topic. Wow. So it's been an omission, and I think unfairly so. Also, in the same process, the council responded on the timings, which I suggested were 540% delay increase at the bridge, by saying it was only 13 seconds and we could fix that by tweaking the traffic lights. That went into a formal response, but there's been no opportunity to challenge that.
Inspiration, or what words of advice would you give to other people, not just for Wokingham making their plan, but for residents who want to get involved with future consultations?
Well, I've learned some things. I've made some mistakes. First of all, I set out on this journey on my own. It was simply interest that led to questions. I've spent about 450 hours of my own time looking at those issues. I also responded from an analytical point of view, as you might expect from my background, on a fact base. This doesn't seem to hold much truck when it comes down to decision making. There's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of political overlay. So my advice to a group would be, don't argue your point just on an emotional angle. I don't want houses, I don't like the green belt being eaten. But mix it with analytical. So you cover all bases, get a diverse group of people, small group of people together, which can cover all aspects of the human interaction of these processes. This is like planning for an Olympic Games. It really is a difficult thing. You have to prepare for hearings, for consultations, and you have to mix it with the two, not forgetting the final piece, which is the political angle. These decisions are not based on fact. They're not really based on emotion. They're based on political philosophy. And you need all of those elements to go into your own defence.
How do you bring the politics, are you saying we need to persuade the politicians? How can you do that?
Well, first of all, the other generations involve the youth. I'm particularly impressed with some of the activity around climate change, which I haven't mentioned, but again, the plan itself states that the only thing to do with climate change is it will be taken as a material consideration in planning, which clearly doesn't reflect the need. But in terms of the political angle that we have, you can lobby your own representative and try and talk to them. Frankly, I had little success in that, because there is a dogged approach to passing a plan. It wouldn't have mattered what I'd said or anybody else said. This plan was going to go through because they decided they wanted to make some money and build on a golf course. I mean, this is easily seen. So how do you tackle it? Yeah, in reality, you've got to tackle it at the ballot box. You've got to tackle it with your vote. If we want to continue with this approach, then we see it at national level, we're seeing it at local level. It's not good enough. We've lost all sense of responsibility and transparency, and I'd like to see it back. So the answer to the question is find yourself, or if you're that way minded, an independent mind, stand up at the ballot box and you'll get the people behind you.
And on that note, Professor Paul Strzelecki, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. One of the things that really surprised me about the Borough Local Plan meeting, where it was approved by Council at the Royal Borough of Windsor of Maidenhead, was that good, honest, hard-working people were so incensed that they stood up and very vocally challenged the councillors and some of the things they said during the meeting. And we're talking to one of those people, Ceri Glen, who's a resident in Maidenhead, who's got a background in radio and TV and is involved currently in event marketing. Ceri, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Ceri, you stood up a number of times, 4 or 5 times, and you got very troubled. You also, to put it politely, and you also were spoken to by some of the policemen who were there. And I felt personally having the policemen there was a little bit heavy-handed, given that these are residents who were accountable to, but that's a separate issue. What so troubled you that you felt you had to stand up and become very vocal?
I think the main thing that troubled me is I was feeling that what people were talking about and what some councillors were saying wasn't actually true. I felt that there was, my personal feeling was some of the stuff being said wasn't being challenged when it should have been. People were talking about stuff which doesn't stack up. Someone was talking about the environment, and they were saying, well, this is good for the environment. Well, to build on Greenbelt is never going to be good for the environment. Another councillor was saying, our experts, our consultants have said that this isn't going to increase the flooding risk. And it's like, well, your consultants, your experts were paid for by you. They're going to give you the story that you want them to give. Also, I was frustrated by the fact that members of the public, residents, haven't been listened to throughout this BLP process. I attended a Zoom meeting last July, which was meant to be a public consultation about the plans at Spencer's Farm. And I jumped onto the call not knowing a lot about the BLP and not knowing a lot about the Spencer's Farm projections and possibilities. And I got greeted by 2 councillors, and I could understand what they were saying, but they were basically saying, we want this is going to happen, and although you residents have got your feelings and your thoughts, that doesn't matter, because this is what we want and this is what we're going to have, and your opinions and your views and yes, your well-being, it doesn't matter, because we are the council and we decided to do this. And it wasn't a public consultation, it was a public briefing, and they jumped on the briefing to tell us what they wanted to do. And I thought, well, this isn't democracy in action. This isn't people listening to residents, trying to find out what works and what doesn't. This isn't people concerned about the well-being of people now. This is people who've got their plans, they've got their blinkers on, in my opinion, and this is what they want. And if you oppose us, I'm sorry, you're just getting in our way because we want this and we're in power and we can decide what we want. And that's also what I saw at the public meeting was councillor after councillor standing up and answering questions, but they weren't answering questions because all the questions had to be submitted in advance and then written answers were made. But it was a bit like watching PMQs in Parliament. The questions weren't answered. There was a bit of political speak, there was a bit of obfuscation, but answers weren't given to easy questions. And then as members of the public who'd asked those questions, we were allowed follow-up questions. And again, questions were asked and they were quite simple questions. And councillor after councillor said, well, I'm going to have to give you a written answer to that. I'm going to have to give you a written answer to that. And I'm left there thinking, well, your colleagues are going to vote on this plan today and you've been asked a question by a resident, but you're not going to give the answer until after the vote has been held. So your fellow councillors aren't going to hear what they might need to hear, which is, quite a precise question. One of the questions I put to Councillor Coppinger was, how much should an affordable home cost in Maidenhead? How much does an affordable home cost? And his rather glib answer was, well, I'm not an estate agent, so I'll have to come back to you in writing. Well, that, as a person who is pushing forward this plan, he should know that data. He should be able to give the answer and he should be able to hold his head high and say, this is how much an affordable home will cost in Maidenhead, and I'm happy to stand by that figure. And he should share that information with all the councillors.
So you asked, there's two aspects of the affordable housing issue. One of which is that what can an average family in Maidenhead afford? What's that value? What is that price? That's just a real value you're looking for, and to see whether the properties that are going to be built anywhere in Maidenhead actually have a significant number of properties at that price point. So that's one thing. And then the other aspect, obviously, when we're looking at the flooding, and we're probably talking about surface water flooding because the piece of greenbelt land at Spencer's farm won't be able to absorb the water.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you'll have concrete, tarmac, bricks, where the water will just run off straight down into your property, into that sort of catchment area. And with climate change already resulting in more volatile weather and increasing patches of heavy rain, and that's only going to get worse. Of course, your concern is that your house might become uninsurable by the sound of it.
Yes, I mean, the question I actually asked was, I've got it here. I asked Councillor Carpenter whether the council would make a guarantee in writing for the residents of the Albury estate and future residents of Spencer's farm site that their homes would be safe from flooding, insurable and resellable for the next 20 years. And would he guarantee market rate repurchase if they could not sell or cover the higher insurance premium due to increased flooding caused by the council and its consultants approving and allowing development in an area already prone to flooding? Councillor Coppinger resigned from answering on the night, so his fellow councillors didn't get to hear his answer. And his answer was, and I'll read it word for word because I got it emailed to me yesterday. Councillor Coppinger's response was, "It is unreasonable to expect the council to make such a guarantee. However, as stated in our original response, work undertaken by the council's flooding consultant confirmed that the site can be developed in a manner which is safe for its lifetime and will not include increased flood risk elsewhere. Any planning application on site AL25 Spencer's Farm will need to be supported by a detailed flood risk assessment." So I've gone back and said, if you trust your consultants, then you will give us those guarantees.
Were there any other aspects of the process that you felt frustrated by? Were there any other things that councillors said on the day that you felt, no, that's not right?
There's an implicit trust, and it's in the code of conduct for councillors that actually you have integrity and you do speak the truth and you work for the residents of your wards. I only looked at the code of conduct 2 days ago. I downloaded it off the council website, and my gut is, and I want to talk to a few people who know more than I do because I know very little. Is I think there may be the opportunity to put in complaints against code of conduct here, because my opinion is some councillors were not as open and honest as they could be, and also had vested interest.
I think someone said to me today that it actually looked like a board meeting of Carla Holmes.
I don't see how the vote was legal. Code of conduct, if the council formed a JV, those councillors should have had to abstain from the vote, because yes, they want the BLP to pass, but they're part of a JV where it has been decided by the council that's what they want. Well, that's not democracy. They weren't representing the views of their residents. I mean, the Maidenhead Advertiser yesterday, they published a poll where 75% of Maidenhead residents are against the BLP and against these development plans.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. That should be shocking for the council and the council's leaders to hear.
Yeah. So you covered a number of points here. Tell me what the policeman said to you.
The last time I set up, and I think I was just asking for an answer. I was asking council to answer the question that was asked or to clarify. A policeman was very respectful, and there was 2 police officers there, and he came in very subtly. He said, "Look, this is your last warning. I've asked you. This is your last warning." And I just said, "Very sorry. I understand. Thank you." And one of the people sat behind me tackled the police officer and said, "Well, this can't be a breach of peace because this is a public meeting. This is a public council meeting, so there can be no breach of peace." And the policeman said, "Well, I'm sorry, we're on private property." And this person, I was sort of earwigging while still listening to what the actual meeting said, "Well, but this is a public council meeting. How can it be a private property?" And they said, "Well, the owner of this private property has asked us to intervene." But also at half time when there was an adjournment at half time, a small little man from the council side came and got in my face very, very aggressively, verbally aggressive. "You can't protest. You can't protest." And this councillor didn't introduce him to me, didn't give me his name, didn't tell me his position, and just laid into me verbally. Wasn't wearing a mask, even though at the beginning of the meeting the mayor said,
How
"Would
did
like
you know it was a
everyone to-"
councillor?
Well, he had a council tie on. He had his council lanyard on. He was also sat next to the mayor during the meeting, to the left of the mayor. I now know who it was. It was Councillor Duncan Sharkey. But
He's not actually a councillor, he's the managing director.
Okay, even worse. And the thing that really annoyed me is I asked him to put on a mask if he was going to talk to me. He wouldn't. Now, he doesn't know that I know people who are shielding. Of course, he doesn't know that. But if someone indoors asks someone before you talk to them, talking at you, because he was just talking at me, to put on a mask, they should put on a mask out of respect.
Okay.
And he said, "You can't protest. Protest not allowed. You can't protest." So my response was, "Well, it's a good job the suffragettes were allowed to protest. Otherwise, half of our society wouldn't have the vote today, really."
Do you feel the council is listening to residents in relation to consultations?
Well, it seems that the only reason there are consultations taking place is because they have to. They don't want to. My personal feeling in my gut is the consultations that have literally just been to tick a box and someone can say, "Yes, we held public consultations." Public consultations don't mean public listening. It just means we had a meeting.
Do you feel the council has taken the needs of residents seriously?
No. I think individual councillors have listened and given their time and understood the feelings and the mood and the needs of local residents. But the council as a group, no. The executive of the council, definitely not. And there's a big block of councillors that have a political affiliation. In my opinion, they definitely don't want to hear what residents' views are because they want to fill this fiscal hole, and the best way to do that is to sell off a few crown jewels to developers for a lot of money, and that will solve a problem they've got.
So, Ceri, it sounds as if there is more work for you and residents to do to try and make sure you are listened to, or you feel listened to, and that your interests are taken seriously.
Yes, we've got to understand the process a little bit better. We've got to get a little bit more knowledge.
Ceri Glen from Maidenhead, thank you very much. And also thank you very much for actually being one of a large number of residents, increasing number of residents who are actually taking much more active role in local government. I personally appreciate that. Thank you, Ceri.
Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me on.
In all fairness, we asked Duncan Sharkey, Managing Director of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, and indeed Thames Valley Police's media team, to come on the show to respond to some of the concerns raised by Ceri Glen during that interview. But as yet, it's been 2 weeks and they have failed to respond, so you can read whatever you want to into that. Next week, we've got a great show, another young person special. We'll be talking about young people's mental health and especially hearing from some of the new Slough youth parliamentarians and what they're doing and how they are pushing local councils, government to make better provision for our young people. Don't miss out. Stay tuned for that show.